think what I can do to get back when it's a special day. Paul, as everyone who's here I'm sure knows, is a really great guy. I'm going to quickly read a little bio, and then I'm going to read what I had to say about the book itself. So Paul has published 8 full-length collections and 6 chapbooks of poetry, the most recent of which are Losing Streak, and tonight's featured publication, Orvieto. Individual poems have appeared in Poetry, Slant, and Southern Poetry Review, and have been selected for publication by Jane Hirschfield, Garrison Keillor, and Adrian Rich. He is an emeritus professor of English at Westmont College, and I'm surprised he ever retired. I don't know if you feel that way, but I thought he was going to be there forever. It's great to have him out in the retired world. He is the 4th poet laureate, I believe, of Santa Barbara. And he was kind enough to let me take a read of this book because, as George Atchison has pointed out, I've also written a little bit about Italy. So I said of Orvieto, those of us who have read and admired Paul Willis's poetry for many years tend to think of him as a writer most at home in the natural world. What a surprise, therefore, to see he is equally skilled at bringing to life the Italian town of Orvieto, its houses of worship, and its spectacular works of art. And yet, while they have been transported to Umbria, Willis's new poems retain the qualities of his earlier works: an unmatched eye for detail, gentle humor, soaring spirituality, and a fierce kindness that embraces the living and the dead, the sinning and those sinned against.
Yay.
And I think that is one of the things that I love the most about Paul, is he is such a gentle, kind, and generous spirit.
Yeah.
Please put your hands together for
Paul. Thank you, David. I know many of you are standing. Thanks for being here as well. We'll keep this reading on the shorter side. There are 26 poems in this chapbook or booklet of poetry. I might read 10 of them, so you can count down if your feet are getting to you. I'm not much of an international traveler, but I had the opportunity to teach a poetry workshop, month-long poetry workshop in fall 21 and fall 24 for Gordon College, which is a sister college to Westmont in the Boston area. So it was a new place to me, and I know, well, I'm just curious, how many of you been to this town of Orvieto? And look at all those hands. It's amazing. Would I know this is putting you on the spot? Would anyone like to share just a quick snapshot memory or impression that you had of that place? LaRon, thank you.
You put me on the spot. If you walk there very early in the morning, you don't know what century you're in.
Oh yeah.
It's amazing. You lose that because of the quiet and all the stones have something to say. There's not one stone that doesn't have something to say.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And the churches and the sculptures and if you
The cathedral.
and the cathedral.
The black and white.
The post was raised there.
Yeah,
So we
horizontal
got half the
stripes.
money back to build
Yeah.
this church in a tiny village.
Right. Other people, Lisa, I know you have also taught at the Orvieto program.
I find the thought amazing that the town is raised on this basalt tufa mesa, and all around the bottom of the cliff are Etruscan tombs.
Oh yeah, Etruscan tombs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The views.
Yeah. Anybody else? I saw a lot of hands. Just yes. Nathan, you have taught there too.
I have taught there as well, and I was there as an undergrad studying the program, and I encountered Luca Signorelli's murals in the chapel, and they feature these dynamic figures rising from tombs and the damnation, and I was so moved by the kind of like power of the figure, and the way
Yeah.
the figure was embodying spirituality in new ways. I love
Yeah.
that. It changed my
that sent you on your way as an artist. I know many of you have enjoyed Nathan's shows, various places downtown. Well, as I said, I had never been to Orvieto, which is in between Rome and Florence. I'd never been to Italy. I'd never been to Europe. So the book I read before I went was Innocents Abroad by Mark Twain. And I felt like one of them. I felt a little, remember Huell Hauser and his, and he would walk around California and go, golly gee, you know? That's pretty much me. So you're getting a series of first impressions here. So you know, these first two poems I want to read, I think I literally wrote on the first day I was there. This first one's called Shutters. If you're following along, it's on page 1. In Orvieto, the cobblestone alleys barely keep the walls apart, the walls of tufa quarried from the cliffs below. Doors and windows face each other like next of kin, all into one another's business. Across the way from my apartment, a pair of fretted bird cages hang in front of open shutters. I thought such cages only existed in old poems, yet here I am, singing in one. And then I walked down the street to buy my groceries, and I saw a little plaque on the main street that said, Sigmund Freud slept here. It's like, what? So says the bronze plaque on the Corso Cava Ur. But really? He just slept? Freud being Freud, we would expect something more. An instance of incest, perhaps, or some athletic fantasy of the sexual imagination. But even Freud needed to sleep. All worn out, he needed a break from the escapades of the flesh. Sweet dreams, Sigmund Freud. Well, this program had a really sweet schedule. I taught ET every morning, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then you have 3 days off. And the first thing I did that first weekend was take a 12-mile hike to a huge lake in a caldera called Lake Bolsena. So hike across the countryside, and it made me feel a little more at home. On the way to Lake Bolsena, it's page 3. Under an oak by a quiet pasture, away from the alleys of Orvieto, the morning sun is welcome on my arms and shoulders. John Denver would be happy here. Whether I am happy here or not, I haven't quite decided yet. But a day-long walk in woods and fields says to me that late October is here as much as anywhere. The pasture rolls to a verge of forest, and beyond are the crimson vacant vines, rows of olive trees in harvest, hazelnuts on a curving upland, even the blur of a wild boar. And then a lake in an old caldera, larger than my circling spirits, brighter than the afternoon. Bolsena, you were good enough for the Etruscans, and Romans too. Mark Twain compared each lake he met to Tahoe in the far Sierra. That's because he never saw Crater Lake on the sky blue crest of the Cascades. But why compare? Why not take each lake as it comes? This one, for example, just over the broad hill from a sunny pasture, ringed with oaks on the Via Romea, lying in wait to take my hand. Well, I mentioned the Etruscans, and Lisa did too. this is the classes, the workshops I were teaching were in writing ekphrastic poetry, so writing poems in response to art and so forth. So I did a good bit of that along with the students. So this poem was written in a museum in Orvieto. It's called Etruscan of Pietra Campana. It's on page 7. Reclining in state, he looks out from the lid of his sarcophagus as if he has something to say. The blunt projection of the nose, the sure and certain pursing of lips, the sheer directness of the gaze. These suggest a confidence, a long accustomed authority in his habits of speech. But what's in the bowl upon his lap, the one tipped slightly toward us in the firm grip of his right hand? Food for his walk to the underworld? Red wine to pour along the path? Coins for the gatekeeper of shadows? And a rippled robe that reaches from beneath his belly to the very tops of his feet. Does it keep him warm in the afterlife? Is it merely for modesty? If you look up sarcophagus in the dictionary, you will find that it means, in the Greek, flesh-eating stone. His body has now been consumed, yet his dignity, it lasts. It lasts. I didn't think that was a funny poem.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
You're funny whether you mean
Okay. Well, of course, they're the concentration of churches and monasteries and convents in Orvieto. The program I was in was located in an old convent adjacent to a church. This poem is called Reliquary. Reliquary is where relics are held, and the relics in this particular reliquary were of a medieval friar, Bonaventura Bonacorsi. It's on page 16 if you're following. He was beatified. I guess that means sort of you're an honorary saint. So, reliquary. The golden casket lies inside a cage behind a sword-pierced statue of the sorrowing Virgin Mary. It is low to the floor. I sit down on a cold step of brick and marble to peer through the glass sides. At first, I spy a simple bed of scattered blossoms, white and pink. But then I see that the flowers cover on a pillow a pair of crossed and yellowed bones. I don't aspire to end up parceled out like that. But as I think about this friar of long ago, a maker of peace between contentious city-states, I don't resent the effort to preserve what little is left of him. And if a breath of his fine dust might pacify our lust for blood, well, let it. Though swords still slash the Blessed Virgin, at her feet there yet remains a hidden balm of bones and blossoms. We could use this guy right now.
Yeah.
We really could.
Bring him back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's another poem on the next page from the same church, titled "In the Church of Santa Maria de Servi." Halfway up one wall, a statue of Jesus stands behind a glass door as if he were a piece of china on display. In fact, at his feet there is something like a crimson dish, a medallion maybe, with a white heart at the center. He wears a red robe over a snowy tunic, and his right hand is extended downward in a helpful sort of way, while his left hand is comfortably raised, index finger pointing vaguely across his chest. He looks down at us with a mild expression, inviting, yes, but also sad and mysterious. We don't quite know what he is thinking. And his locks and beard are a little bit gray, as if he were tired of waiting for us. We know it is Jesus, though, because he is wearing a spoked halo as big and strong as a steering wheel on a UPS delivery truck, which means he has something to deliver. And this is why we should let him out of his crystalline closet. It's time, Jesus. You can come down now. Stretch your legs. Walk on out the door of the church and catch some rays of morning sun on the Piazza Belisario. Maybe even turn the corner onto the Corso Cava Or and order a cone of chocolate gelato, if the shop is open today. Then we can sit at an iron table and catch you up on all the gossip you have missed. And you'll reach out with that hand of yours and ask, beatifically, where did you say the napkins were? We're going to go to another church, and this is a poem called Fresco Behind a Wooden Statue of St. Andrew. And fresco's a little involved, so here's a poor reproduction. I'll pass it around this side, and then you can, maybe some of you get a look at it. It's on page 20. This is a prose poem. On the plastered wall of the sanctuary of Sant'Andrea in Orvieto, a strong young man in a green robe, red sleeves beneath, holds up a bloody sword. As in so many frescoes of the Renaissance, his eyes and nose and mouth have been dissolved by time. He is facing, if you can call it facing, a red-robed woman on his right. Her eyes are exceedingly sharp. She gestures toward him with one hand, a tight gesture, and holds the other over her heart. The man, likewise, has placed his left hand loosely over his own heart. Behind him, and to his left, an older couple lie tucked in bed, face up. Their heads rest on matching pillows. The older man has a white beard, neatly trimmed, and he wears a green nightcap that matches the young man's robe in color. The older woman wears a white headscarf, just like the woman who is standing. The eyes of the couple in bed are closed. Both of them are bleeding profusely from stab wounds in the neck. If it were not in a church, and if Duncan had a wife in the play, the fresco would seem to mark the moment in which Macbeth says, "I have done the deed." The moment in which Lady Macbeth receives the news in a fury of cold agitation. But this must be the story of the martyrdom of some saint, of two saints, Mr. and Mrs. Saint. But what if the two are not married? What if the woman in red is the wife and the woman in bed is the paramour, the man in green the hired assassin? I wish we could see the swordsman's face. Is he aghast at what he has done? Relieved to have taken vengeance? Simply glad to receive his pay? St. Andrew might know, but his wooden statue has turned its back on all this sorry business. We have to look farther afield to the crucifix above the altar. The very sad man hanging there, his face quite clear in its agonies, looks out over the nave and sees, and bleeds, and sees, and bleeds, and knows. And what he knows is that the faceless man with the sword is the one who will become a saint, Saint Julian. He has just murdered his own parents, who had come on a surprise visit while he was hunting, and who were sleeping in his bed when he came back. He has just murdered them because he thought he had found his wife cheating on him. But now his wife arrives to tell him he was mistaken, he was wrong, and Julian is filled with remorse. This is what the hanging man on the cross well knows. And he knows that Julian and his wife as well will spend the rest of their stricken lives helping the sick and giving shelter to the weary. For a night of killing, years of care. And at once and at last, Julian will be forgiven. No longer seen in a fresco darkly, he will be known, and he will know. He will receive his face. Now, people had forgotten what that fresco was about, and it was a recent Japanese woman visitor who saw the fresco and realized the story behind it and re-alerted the people of Orvieto what this was about. And the thought is this church of Sant Andrea was in the center of the town, and medieval pilgrims would find a place to rest there. So St. Julian is patron saint of hospitality. So, but you know, with a very gruesome backstory. How are we doing? Just a few more. You know, one of the books I use with my students is by someone named David Starkey. It's called View Caravaggio. It's
Such a good book.
Beautiful book about the Renaissance artist Caravaggio, his life and his paintings. And read this with our students, and we decided to write a few poems in response to Caravaggio's painting. And so I want to read one in response to the cover image, which is Saint Francis in ecstasy. I'll pass it around. Saint Francis in ecstasy. And if you can't see the image, Saint Francis is sort of fallen back into the arms of an angel. The angel looks tenderly interested, uncommonly so, in the sacked out figure of Francis, gently supported in his arms. Or maybe he is just patiently waiting for this mortal to wake from his spiritual coma so that he can depart on yet another appointed round, rescuing the next pope from his cardinal sins, or plucking a child from a deep canal outside a doorstep in Venice. In any case, Francis, dark-haired, bearded head, lolls back in the swaddled lap of the divine messenger, who in this instance has nothing to say, Francis being, as he is, beyond sight or hearing or sensation. And that rough brown robe of the earthy saint, tied at the waist with a simple cord, must be scratching those perfectly formed angelic thighs in a most uncomfortable way. Forbearance, though, is a heavenly virtue which shines in the light like the bare shoulder of this visitor with the exquisite bedside manner, the same shoulder that somehow sprouts from the back of the scapula, a dusky wing. All right. I think I will take pity on your aching feet and just read two more brief poems. George Atchison, in his kind review of the book in the Independent, noted some poems about World War II. And here's one of them. It's called On the Monument to the Murdered Seven. It's on page 33. And it too is a prose poem. I didn't know the story at first. I had assumed that because of the date on the monument, 1944, this curious figure full of hollows, arms raised high, was placed beneath umbrella pines atop the cliffs to celebrate the liberation of the city. But the plaque says March, and the city wasn't freed until June. Another tale altogether. How the Nazi commander, so in love with the golden facade of the Duomo, visible for miles around, relinquished the town to the British without firing a single gun. They say he had become friends with the bishop, locked himself inside the cathedral for private recitals on the organ. "We'll fight elsewhere," he said, and they did. But this same Nazi commander, 3 months earlier, because of some small act of resistance, chose at random 7 young men of the city to be taken below the walls and shot. And that is the moment, not of relief, but of lasting shock, which is recalled in this stone statue full of space. Federico, Raimondo, Alberto, Duilio, Amore, Ulderico, I nostri cari, our dear ones. Well, I'll end with another ramble in the countryside. And again, thank you for coming. It's a little shock to my heart to see a number of you from different parts of our lives, so it's a sweet thing. This is called Vineyard Below Castel Rubello. It's on page 36. Now, in November, the vineyard has long been harvested of its many grapes. The vines relax themselves in the sun and drop lazy leaves, gold and crimson, onto the long green paths. Row on row bends down the slope in careless flame until lost in shadow below the castle on the hill. A place contested by Dante's Guelphs and Ghibellines, then later damaged 2 of the towers in the Second World War. Orange and ochre butterflies traverse the air around my knees, and a pale gentian blooms alone beside my boots. If you ask them about blood betrayals and flying shells of artillery, they wouldn't know. They absolutely wouldn't know.
Yay.